Welcome to another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, Mom and Dad. And I'm on my own today. Dr. Dejana is not available, so we are just going to dive into this subject, and I'll bring the panel in a few minutes and our special guest. But I want to show you a short video that will help set up what it is we're going to be talking about. And I am so impressed with these two young men. So enjoy.
Hi, I'm Connerly.
And I'm Barkley.
And we're the founders of Cardboard Superheroes.
Welcome to our 2020 Comic-Con panel. In this video, we'll be talking about how we started Cardboard Superheroes and some of the lessons we learned.
And then we'll go into detail about how we built Hulkbuster from the beginning to now.
As we mentioned in our WonderCon video, we're super excited to reveal our completed Hulkbuster.
Well, half completed.
Okay, so unfortunately we weren't able to fully complete Hulkbuster as there are a lot of setbacks, but we also just launched our new Comic-Con Museum workshop.
And we're going to tell you more about that later, but for now we're going to tell you about our origin story.
One of the most common questions we get asked is, how did we start Cardboard Superheroes?
Well, it all started back in my toddler days.
That is wonderful. And I'd like to introduce you to the dad for those two boys. Peter Lee is joining us. Thank you, Peter, for being here. That is just so wonderful to see on so many levels. First of all, the fact that the boys initiated this and are so excited to engage and to help others see what they're doing. Also, the poise and confidence in the way they present themselves and the way they present what they're doing is just so. Where does that come from, Peter?
Yeah, so I've been in the business world for a while, and one thing I noticed all along the way is there's sort of pure like intelligence, and there's also just people skills, presentation skills, and I've always found that to be pretty important. And so when they were young, we actually put them in improv class because we wanted them to be very comfortable in awkward situations where they had to sort of on the fly be able to speak. And so they were both actually fairly shy when they were younger. And after years of improv class, they are very comfortable on stage. And so it was a very purposeful thing that we did because we felt like that was an important thing. And we didn't want them to be sort of in their shell. So we started them when they were early elementary school.
Oh, that is so wonderful. And for someone, I used to own an acting school for children.
Okay.
That was the reason. I did it
Right.
for two reasons: to help them be more comfortable in when they had to present to classes or that kind of thing, but also to inspire them to read, because I had a lot of young kids who would come to the acting classes who were not readers. And I always say to them, well, listen, the kids who read a lot have a much better chance at acting jobs if you want to act, because they'll understand, if they read the classics, they'll understand time periods better. So, you don't really have to read, but if you're interested in acting,
Right.
trying to motivate them. I'm going to invite our panel in to talk about this, because I know everybody who's seen this video is very excited to talk to you and to hear more. So I'll start with Anne McMullen, who is an educational consultant, and she originally was the head of technology for the school district outside of Houston. She's now in Los Angeles and is, I'm not sure the role with COSN. You can help me with that, Anne.
Happy to do that. So yes, with the Consortium for School Networking, I am the project director for their Empowered Superintendent Initiative, helping superintendents with digital transformation across the U.S. Thrilled to be here today, Leah. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Dr. Mark Riddle with us, and Mark is with the West Coast University in Southern California. Mark, do you want to say hi?
It's great to see you again.
Thank you for being here. And also Tim Griffin, who has is retired teacher, taught elementary school, most grades. Do you want to say hi, Tim?
Hi.
And
Good to see
Tim,
you guys today.
Thank you. One of Tim's goals is to put K-8 curriculum to music. So he has an organization called Griffin Ed, which has spectacular music that is just a great way to get kids thinking about science and math and engineering. There's so many great songs in there. So thank you for being with us. And yeah, and so Peter, I think the fact that you have given the boys the room also to do, because I'm guessing that you've had to move out of some of the rooms in your house. I've seen how many creatures they've created.
Yeah, it has definitely taken over parts of our house. The models are big and their supplies, and they have their craft room, which is a horrible mess, but you know, in a creative, exciting way. And so it's been a real joy just to see them really embrace something they enjoy doing.
Yeah, that creative mess is an important point, because we build these maker spaces in schools, and I'll go out and visit the schools after, and my favorite maker spaces to visit are the ones that have glue spilled and paint spilled, and they're tidy, like they're clean,
Right.
but they're a place where a kid can say, like, I can work in here. I can do, like, it's okay to make a mess. It's okay to, because making is messy, and we're trying to encourage schools to embrace more of a learning by doing. And you know, it's not easy when a teacher is used to everything being orderly and on time with everything, and there's, you know, it doesn't work that way. And it's clear that your boys have really benefited from the well, obviously the improv was a really smart idea, but also just the ability to, like, they're engineers. They're figuring out some pretty difficult issues. I loved the part where when they realized that they needed a stronger core,
Right.
that they had to, you know, so it's a trial and error. And what have their failures been like for them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, it started off when they were young and they would build stuff. And I think, you know, in our role as parents, I think it was more of the encouragement, like, hey, don't give up. Like, looks great. And yeah, you mess up here and you have to throw this around, but like, you're going to learn along the way. And so I think probably on the model side, probably the biggest failure was they never built an internal frame. And a lot of the models that didn't, like a skeleton, they just started falling apart. And so they sort of learned, okay, we got to do that because, you know, we have skeletons. And so it was sort of a learning process. So as they've gone along, the model's gotten sort of, I guess, better and better, and more like stable versus falling apart. Yeah.
Yeah, Leah, if I could just add to that, I'd love, and I'm so glad we got to see even just that little portion of the video on this right now, because to have at the very beginning, like, here's this big thing, oh no, that one didn't work out. That is such a powerful lesson,
Right.
especially today, because we're all trying to reinvent how we do things, and it doesn't work perfectly the first time, and
Right.
that's okay. And this notion of failure being part of the learning process, I think, is something that we're all trying to embrace, so that it's not all perfect, like you were describing earlier, Leah, where everything's in order. It doesn't work that way. And I love that you included that right at the onset of that
Right.
video. So it's terrific.
Yeah, what are the boys planning? Like, do they have an idea of their future and what they'd like to be doing? And do they see themselves working together as young adults, or?
Yeah, they talk about it. So, you know, my oldest son has talked a lot about being an entrepreneur. He likes starting things, and my younger son, he's eighth grader. He's still trying to figure it out, but he does enjoy engineering and building. So we think that might be a path for him. But I think this experience on both sides have been, you know, like, perfect for them. You know, as an entrepreneur, it's like you're essentially starting a little company here. You know, you're emailing people and you're doing presentations and you're having to plan out what you're doing. And so I'm like, you couldn't invent a better, you know, teaching situation than actually going through this. So it's been great.
Yeah, Peter, I love that that you picked up on that. One of the things, I did a lot of engineering with my kids in my classroom, even before we called it STEAM, or even STEM. And one of the things that I focused on when I would explain this to the parents, why are we trying to build a device to lift up cinder blocks with one hand with a bunch of kindergartners and so on? I said, it's not that I need them to learn to be engineers. It's all about what they can learn from engineering. Things like planning, trial and error, teamwork, accountability, consequences, safety. And that's where most of the pleasure comes in, and most of the learning is just in the process.
That's absolutely true. I think everything you said, I think they're experiencing, and I think, I think in the notes you mentioned like maybe advice for parents. Like I think one thing that hopefully we did a good job of is pushing them to set their sights bigger. I know there were times when they were building some models, and one of the probably big examples was my son built the Iron Man helmet. And he really liked that, and I'm like, well, what about building the body? And he's like, well, that I can't do this. Just, it's like he was intimidated. And I'm like, well, try it out, and he was frustrated. And he actually, in the video, you see some of that. But after months and months of work, because a lot of them want instant gratification, but once they put in the work, they look back and they're like, oh my gosh, I accomplished this. And they realize that you can't just do something a little bit and give up. It's going to take a lot of effort, but it's worth it in the end. And I think that actually for me is probably one of the biggest lessons I see, because they see that, hey, there's a goal further ahead that I can strive for, and it's going to take a lot of work to get there, not to give up beforehand.
Such an important lesson for young children. And we find a lot of kids who if they don't know how to complete something at the beginning, they're reluctant to start.
Right.
So what an amazing opportunity you have afforded the boys by encouraging them to reach for things that are above what they think they're capable of doing.
Right.
And to learn it so young. What an advantage. So other advice for parents, like what do you do? What do the boys, do they like butt heads and fight over their decisions?
Yeah, probably like any brothers, they love each other, they hate each other, they fight, and they go play. And it's just like, I grew up with an older brother. So for me, I'm like, yeah, this is how it works. But my wife, she had one brother, and they both got along really well when they grew up. So she's sort of like, oh my gosh, they're fighting. And like, I don't understand this. And I'm like, no, it's good. And so they have this creative destruction but ultimately I think, they see themselves on the same team and they're working toward a goal. And so it's been actually great for them to work together.
Right on.
Yeah.
I have a question. They did that thing for the Comic-Con museum. I think about all the science fiction conventions that I've been to, Comic-Con and WesterCon, WorldCon, things like that. One thing they always have there is a big art show, okay. And a lot of the pieces are up for auction.
Okay.
Not only could that be a chance for your kids to make some good money, but if they wanted, maybe when they're a little bit older, if they wanted to try their hand at welding and doing things like that out of sheet metal, they could probably make some serious money.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. They were interviewed one time, and someone had asked them a question. It was like, "Oh, are you going to sell any of your pieces?" And at the time, I guess they'd never thought about it. They looked at each other and like, and I think my son sort of jokingly said, "Oh, they're like our babies. We can't sell them." Like, it hadn't really entered their head that like, oh, we would sell them. So, but since then, they do talk about, oh, maybe we could make these kits or whatever. But they've been recently pursuing trying to create like a mini arts curriculum because people are in COVID and maybe it's harder to do some of the arts at home. And so with the Comic-Con Museum, they created sort of mini models that people can do at home. And so with a YouTube video instruction and some printable templates, kids can cut it out at home and glue it and make their own like miniature like R2-D2 or Wally or things like that. And they've been continuing to pursue that. And so they're working with the Comic-Con Museum right now. And they actually were invited by a high school out in Ventura to do a Zoom presentation for their high school art class. And so that just happened the other day. And so they logged in and they were, sort of telling the class, their experience. So they've been really enjoying just sharing, how they do stuff and it's been exciting.
Well, we definitely are going to want to talk to them about what they're doing, but I am really happy to hear from you. And Mark, did you have something? I see you unmuted yourself, so I'm assuming I was stepping on something.
Oh,
you were-
not at all. We had airplanes flying over.
Oh,
I am in awe of that notion of the entrepreneurial spirit and developing that in kids. I think that's, I mostly just love all the education that I've had over the years, but the one place, is if they'd only spent a little more time on that kind of stuff in, say, junior high,
Right.
I think, gosh, what opportunities might have opened up, might have appeared. So I find that very appealing. The kind of exposure that a lot of kids get is like, okay, well, we're going to teach you to be an entrepreneur by having the annual candy drive or something, right? And the kids don't learn anything from it. They're just trying to satisfy some teacher's, need to participate in the thing. So they're enduring it. The parents are enduring it, but to have the kind of confidence to send the email, to make the phone call, to follow up when somebody doesn't get back to you,
Right.
to have a plan, to have a roadmap and stuff. They're probably not going to become cardboard entrepreneurs, but whatever it is that they end up doing. I was amazed by the models themselves and thinking, there are character studios in the, over at Sony that don't have, as much classy stuff going on as you have over there in your, your side room and stuff. So yeah, it's all amazing.
Thank you.
yeah.
Peter, I'm sorry,
Go
Leah.
ahead, Mary. No, go ahead, Ann.
Peter, I'm just curious if you can briefly tell us the process. So from the idea that this is who we're going to create, this is a superhero, what's next as they work together? Do they sit and do an outline, a drawing? How does that process go?
Yeah, so sometimes I'll brainstorm and we'll talk about, what model do you want to build next? And they talk to their friends or whatever, and they come up with some model. A lot of times it's like what the most recent movie that came out or is popular. And then they'll print out a bunch of images that they see online. And then this is, I think early on, one place I also help them out is the math behind it. Like, how do you scale, from a page to something larger? And like, okay, well, it's ratios, and they're pretty good at math. And like, oh, they picked it up pretty quickly, and they start doing that. And then I guess more recently, it's let's build the frame first, because before it was just like they start building body parts, but then they weren't strong, and they would arms would fall off and things like that. And so now they start building the frame to make sure it's like there's a strong core, and then they start building the different pieces. And yeah.
And you still have
love
stacks and stacks of cardboard in your home as they
We
show.
Yeah, that's actually we have like an outdoor shed.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess it's their grandfathers, my wife's father, had an electronics business, and he had this great industrial grade boxes that were like really strong. And so they use that for some of the models. So they're not like the really thin cardboard. It is a little stronger than normal.
It's not just the Amazon deliveries.
Right. What they say is those are perfect for little mini models, the
Right.
tutorial stuff, because they're smaller. But for the big ones, they might not hold up.
And do you have to buy cardboard, or you're still getting the remnants that work?
Yeah, we still have, I don't know how many, but like stacks and stacks of boxes. So I think, they might last them all through schooling before we have to actually buy any.
Yeah, I think Mark's point about the learning the entrepreneurial skills. I mean, that's the debate on that has been, making kids grow up too fast, and we don't want them to be business people when they're children. But I think that the reality is, if it's fun for them,
Right.
those skills that they're learning are the lifelong skills that they'll need to be successful at whatever they choose to do.
Mhm.
And also just the experience that you've given them, because it sort of sounds like you're maybe a bit of a coach with them and helping to get them started on things, but then the ability to let them have the failure, like the need, figuring out that it needs a skeleton, and then you related that to the fact that our bodies have a skeleton.
Right.
So there's just so many opportunities to learn in this. And one of the points, Tony Thurman talked this week about distance learning and what they're trying to do to support families at home. One of the things that was said was about the fact that distance learning isn't just about doing this academic lesson and learning this. It's about finding a way to make everything that we're doing a learning opportunity. So if you're making supper with the kids and you're measuring things out and you're counting things out and you're making sure that there's enough for everybody who sits around the table, and all of those things become learning opportunities. But it sounds like you've been on that page since the boys were toddlers.
Yeah, I mean, when they were young, we tried to expose them to a lot of things. So they did the typical, piano lessons and taekwondo and sports, and they still play soccer. But, I remember, it was like, there's always a thing of like, find your passion. Like, what do you want to do? And when, one of the things is I just feel like maybe this day and age, they have too many easy distractions. When they're bored, they pick up the iPad or whatever. And I remember trying to like limit that and see what they would do when they got bored, when they didn't have access. And they would start building stuff. And so we looked at them like, hey, we want to encourage that, because that was something that, just took them away from games all the time, but was also fun for them. And so, I think that was also just like an encouragement and like, hey, have at it, like have fun. We'll buy whatever supplies you want. We won't let that be a burden or a hurdle, I guess. And so I think it's just been a really good experience and they've enjoyed it.
Well, and one of the things about working with cardboard is that it's a low barrier to entry.
Right.
Even for the families who are thinking, well, I don't have a whole room to give to the statues that they might create, but I can help with the resources, like
right.
Cardboard and some. What do the boys use, like glue guns to put them together? Is that what it is?
It's very simple. It's cardboard, hot glue, and scissors, basically, and that covers 99% of it. Yeah,
that is really great. So I'm kind of monopolizing this. You guys feel free to jump in and.
See, Leah, I'm thinking, in addition to my ed tech work, I was a U.S. history teacher for many years, and I'm thinking one could build models of historical characters,
right.
And even do a little research on the character itself. And appropriate this week might be RBG, and
right.
you do it and put the lace collar on her, and So I think it's a fascinating process, and kudos to you and your family for their amazing creativity. But what a thrill! It's wonderful. I think there are a lot of different avenues where one could go with that. And to Leah's and your point both, very simple supplies. That's doable.
Yeah, they have an uncle who is an architect, and he saw that what they're doing is like, oh my gosh, you could build all the world's monuments, and so it definitely can go in many different directions. But they're Marvel fans and superhero fans, like their age, they grew up with the Avengers, and so it's a love. And my older son's like, he wants to be an entrepreneur, but at the same time, half of him's like, if I could get a job at Marvel or Disney, like that would be the dream job. So they laugh about that as well. Yeah.
Well, they could start shooting movies with their characters as well, and because they're also both so very expressive and comfortable. How's your wife about the messes around the house?
She's like, as long as you keep it in your craft room, like that's fine. You can do whatever you want there. But when it starts drifting out into the hallway, into the other rooms, and it's like, let's clean up a bit. Yeah.
There is no making without messes.
Right.
It just isn't.
Yeah, and I think, again, like a lot of people who have seen the models, they're like, oh my gosh, like how could you have done this? And looking at it, like it is like cool and impressive, but if they saw the struggles and the mistakes along the way, not that it wouldn't be as impressive, but it becomes real. It's like, oh, like this is normal stuff. You just have to keep working at it because it doesn't disappear. It's if you see, and they went into that when they did that presentation for that high school class, they spent most of the time talking about like stuff they messed up, and let's go into the model and show you like, this is really hard here, and we had to redo this like multiple times. And so it makes it more real, that it's not just like, oh, this gifted like, Picasso that all of a sudden touched the thing and it's perfect. It's like, no, it's like, you should see the pile of throwaway stuff that were trial and error to get to this. Yeah.
I think in the arts, that is one of the biggest messages we have to send to, new students, because they always get the message that, oh my goodness, this person is so talented. They're just, they must have just always been so good at it. And one thing I've tried to do in my songwriting workshops that I do with kids is I always bring in at least one song to share that's a complete disaster that I would never do in a show, never put on an album, and just show them how terribly wrong it can go sometimes, because that sort of lowers the bar.
Yep.
And so now it's okay to fail. In fact, you have to fail a bunch of times, because that's how you figure out what's going to work.
Yeah, that's so important. I think, looking at what the boys have created, to most kids, it would be overwhelming to think like, wow, where would I even begin? But the fact that they shared the flubs and the mistakes, it like really does open the door to a lot of other children to think, yeah, I know as a student myself, I was a late in life academic, and I went back to school in my 40s, and my professor, who was my advisor, was working on a paper when I was there in my first quarter, and he was on version 38 when I started helping him. And I thought, oh man, if you can do 38 versions before you submit, I think I can write. I think I can do this. And it really was those moments that kind of helped me see that, yeah, like I was eyeing the PhD from a distance. And it let me kind of move closer and closer and think, okay, my PhD may take 15, 20 years, but if I can do that many versions, I can get my papers together and finish a dissertation. It didn't quite take me that long, but I think for kids, being able to show them the process, and that the failure is not the end, it's information on your way to the end that helps you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you watch the video, one of the funny bits is they had built hands for Hulkbuster, which is the really big model. And I remember the day they started putting things together, and it was like these tiny little hands on this huge shit, and we were like cracking up. And they're like, oh my God, we spent so much time on this, and we got to redo them. But then later on, we're like, this is a great, like, you should show that in your video, because it shows you, like, like these mess ups, like, people think, no, first try it happens. It doesn't work that way. And so we were like, no, you should include that, because I think that's something that, people would want to see. So yeah, if you check out the video, you can see, parts of that.
Yeah. And how about for you as the parent, when you're watching them make something, and with the structure itself, for example, like, was there a part of you that wanted to say to them, guys, you've got to make an internal structure or they're going to fall apart? And
I had no idea either. we were watching them build, and like, and part of the progression was like the first big model they built was R2D2, which is the little droid robot, which is fairly simple. And when you actually zoom into it and we look at it, it's like they're proud of it, but they look back and like, oh, they're almost like embarrassed, like, oh my God, look how messy it is, look how simple it is. And I'm like, no, that's what got you started. And, they sort of slowly progressed. And so, when we watched them, we didn't know what it would become, because at that point, we never thought this would happen. We were just like, oh, it keeps them busy. It's sort of fun. And we never thought, and after they had this whole collection of models, even then, we never really expected this to turn into anything. And it was a trip down to Comic-Con. We love going to Comic-Con, and we've taken the boys the last, aside from this year, previous 2 years. And then they announced the Comic-Con Museum. And we were like, oh my gosh. And they were like falling over, like, this is amazing. And so we went there, and they had their iPad, and they had some pictures on it. So they showed one of the people the pictures, and they were like, oh, this is amazing. Like, we should do something together. And we were like, oh, okay, that would be, and so that one situation sparked this whole thing to happen. But if that meeting hadn't happened, they would probably be in their room building stuff, and it's sort of fun, but people wouldn't know about it except their friends. So it's interesting to sort of serendipitously, how things happen.
Well, and I think the real secret there is mom and dad in exposing them to as much as you can, and being open to whatever the boys are directing you and their lives to. And So we are out of time, but I want to say thank you. I mean, we could talk about this for a long time and not get bored. But thank you so much, Peter, for
Thanks
joining
for having
us.
me.
Yeah, and thank you, Anne and Mark and Tim for being here. And that's it for today. So thank you for joining us for Teachers for Teachers, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.